what the medical examiner or the pathologist found was that even though the execution protocol was supposed to strike Mikal's heart directly, just as the autopsy finding indicated for Brad Sigmon, that by and large the firing squad missed Mikal's heart. And there was only two perforations in his right ventricle. But other than those two, just those two perforations in his ventricle, his heart was left almost completely intact. And instead of the heart being obliterated, as it was in Mr. Sigmon's case, his liver and pancreas were struck directly. And then the other significant finding from the autopsy report is that it appears that Mikal was only shot with two bullets instead of the required three under the South Carolina firing squad protocol.
The capital punishment sentence of Mikal Mahdi was carried out tonight pursuant to the order of the South Carolina Supreme Court and in accordance with state law. The execution was performed at 6:01 p.m. by a three-person firing squad. He was pronounced dead by a physician at 6:05 p.m.
This method of execution was approved based on essentially a promise or a representation from from SCDC representatives that this was the protocol that was going to be followed. This firing squad presumably was adopted because it's far simpler and more straightforward than a lethal injection, which is somewhat of a medicalized procedure. There's a much higher risk of error. It's more complicated. So firing squad is supposed to be simple. It's supposed to be harder to make mistakes. And so in only the second firing squad execution in South Carolina, you already have an incredibly significant mistake, which is that they missed the target. There's only a single photo taken of Mr. Mahdi's torso. We were provided a photograph of an opaque bottle, which supposedly had bullet fragments in this bottle that were recovered from Mikal's body. And there was no x-ray done whatsoever. Mr. Mahdi's clothes were provided to the pathologist. There was no examination that was done of the clothes. They were simply provided to the funeral home. And so it's really disturbing to me that you have this execution, which it's obvious to anyone who looks at it. It was obvious to me as a layperson upon reading his autopsy report that something went wrong here. We should want to figure out, what it was that went wrong when you've got state government carrying out the most serious, most grave possible type of function that state government can carry out, and yet the less than the minimum amount was done in terms of investigation and documentation of his body. For one thing, I mean, that's the reason why we have a state and federal constitution. Our constitutions, don't simply authorize capital punishment and say that the government is allowed to kill people, any way they like. There's a floor or sort of a minimum level of humanity that our constitutions require under the cruel and unusual punishment clauses. So it's not just that, any type of execution will do. At the very least, we need to ensure that we're having executions that comply with the state and federal, the Eighth Amendment and the state constitutional analog of the Eighth Amendment.
What news station is it? Fox? AP. What?